Hey, everyone, and welcome back to Revise and Resubmit.
Yes.
You know how we love those super dense academic articles?
Oh, absolutely.
And trying to make them make sense for everyone?
Yeah.
We'll get ready. Because today we're diving into a fascinating editorial.
Okay.
From one of the top journals in management research.
All right.
It's the Academy of Management Journal.
You know it?
AMJ.
AMJ, that's right.
As the cool kids call
The
it.
cool kids, yeah.
And what's really exciting about this piece is that it's coming from an FT 50 listed journal.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So that means it's super influential in the field.
Yeah,
And the insights we're about to uncover carry a lot of weight.
for sure.
So today we're tackling the AMJ Management Research Campus.
All right.
Think of it as a secret weapon for researchers to design top-notch studies.
Yeah.
And for readers like you and me to actually understand those studies without pulling our hair out.
That's right. Without pulling our hair out. I like that.
It's true. The canvas basically shines a spotlight on the 9 key elements that make a research project really stand out.
Uh-huh.
These elements are always there in good research,
Yeah.
but they're often kind of hidden beneath the surface.
Right.
The canvas helps make them crystal clear.
They make them very easy to see.
So it's like a cheat sheet for both doing research and being a smarter reader of research. Sign me up.
I mean, that's a great way to think about it. Yeah, absolutely.
For both. And the best part is it works for any kind of research.
Yeah.
Whether it's qualitative or quantitative.
Doesn't matter.
You name it.
It's true.
Okay, so the first thing they talk about is starting with a puzzle.
Okay.
Now, I'm hoping this isn't about trying to fit pieces together.
No.
Right.
No jigsaw puzzles here.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So in research speak, a puzzle is basically a big unsolved problem.
Yes.
In the world of management that researchers want to tackle. It's kind of like the why behind the whole research project.
Yeah, it's the big question. It's the reason you're doing the research in the first place.
Okay, that makes
Yeah.
sense. The example they gave in the article was, how does sustainability affect firm performance?
It's a good one.
That's a pretty hefty puzzle.
Yeah, that's a big one.
And having a well-defined puzzle sets the stage for everything that comes next.
Totally.
It's like choosing your destination before you start a road trip. Without it, you're just driving around aimlessly.
You're just going to get lost.
So let's say we have our puzzle and we're ready for our road trip.
Right.
What's the next step? Do we just start driving?
I mean,
Or do we need a map or a GPS?
I would say you at least need a mag.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's where framing comes in.
Okay.
Researchers need to figure out who they're trying to reach with their research.
Right.
Like, who's their audience and what conversations are already happening in the academic world around their chosen puzzle.
Right.
Imagine you're trying to join a conversation at a party. You got to kind of listen in a little bit before you jump in.
For sure.
Right.
Yeah, you don't want to barge in talking about something nobody cares about.
So it's like finding the right group of people at that party, the ones who are already kind of interested in what you have to say.
Absolutely.
You don't want to be talking about sustainability with people who only care about, I don't know, the latest dance craze.
Right. Exactly.
Or something like that.
yeah, find your people.
And there's a 2-step process to get this framing right.
Right.
First, you have to do a deep dive into the existing research.
Okay.
What's already been
Yeah.
studied.
What's out there?
What are the limitations?
Uh-huh.
What questions are still left unanswered?
Right.
It's like detective work. Examining the clues before cracking the case.
Very good.
So what's the second step in frame?
Okay, so the second step.
Once you've done your detective work,
Yeah.
you need to figure out how your research fits into the bigger picture.
Right.
How does your work build on challenge? Or maybe even refine what's already known?
Yeah, how does it all fit together?
You're not just adding another piece to the puzzle. You're changing the way people see the entire picture.
Yeah, you're shifting the conversation.
So it's not just about filling a gap. It's about making a real difference in how people think about the topic.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's where a powerful research question comes in.
Okay.
A good research question has the potential to change people's minds.
Uh-huh.
Or even create a whole new consensus.
Right. It can really shake things up.
It's not just another statistic, it's a game changer.
Yeah, a good research question, it's like the engine that drives the whole project.
This is all making so much sense. We've got our puzzle, we've framed it,
All right, we're making progress.
and we've got a killer research question.
Awesome.
What's next?
So now we get to the heart of it all, the theoretical framework. This is where you build the foundation of your research. You're making sure it's strong enough to support everything that comes after.
Yeah.
And this framework has 3 key parts.
Okay.
The what,
Uh-huh.
the how,
And
and the why.
Okay, I have to admit the what, how, and why.
I know, it
Sounds a little
a
intimidating.
little bit like a children's book or something.
Can you break it down for us?
Yeah, of course. So think of it this way.
Okay,
You're putting together the story of your research,
right.
and first you have the what, which is all about defining the key concepts involved.
Okay,
And in research terms, we call these constructs.
constructs.
Constructs, yeah.
So in our sustainability example,
Yeah.
the constructs would be things like sustainability itself and maybe firm performance.
Right, exactly.
We need to define exactly what those terms mean
Yeah,
in the context of our research.
in the context of your research, exactly.
You got it. And how you define these constructs can actually be different depending on whether you're doing qualitative
That's a really good point.
or quantitative research. If you're dealing with numbers,
Yes.
you need very specific, measurable definitions.
Right.
But if you're analyzing like words and ideas from interviews or observations, you might use broader, more interpretive definitions.
Yeah. Qualitative research is all about meaning making.
It's true.
So it's less about those hard and fast definitions.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
You wouldn't measure happiness the same way you'd measure, say, the height of a tree.
That's a good way to put it. No, you wouldn't.
Now, once you've defined your what,
All right.
you move on to the how.
Okay.
This is where you map out the relationship between those constructs.
Yes, exactly.
So are we saying that sustainability and firm performance are like best friends? Or are they frenemies?
I like that.
Do they move in sync?
Yeah.
Or does one impact the other in some way?
Those are great questions.
Right.
Yeah, those are exactly the kinds of questions you'd be asking in the how stage. It's about figuring out the dynamics of the relationship.
Got it.
Are we talking about a positive correlation, a negative correlation? Maybe these constructs influence each other in a chain reaction? Or could it be even more complex than that? We don't know yet.
Okay, and then finally the why. This is where we really get down to the nitty-gritty, right?
This is my favorite part.
Ooh.
This is where the magic happens. The why is all about explaining the mechanisms that drive those relationships.
Okay.
Why should we believe that sustainability affects firm performance? How does that actually work in the real world?
So you're not just saying, hey, these two things are connected somehow. You're actually digging deeper.
Way deeper.
Okay.
Yeah.
And explaining the reasons behind that connection.
You're like a detective again, but this time you're not just looking at the clues. You're figuring out the motive, the opportunity. You want the whole story behind the crime.
And this often means drawing on other theories, right?
Absolutely.
And getting into the really nitty-gritty details of why should we believe this is actually happening.
Exactly. And, sometimes you have to get creative here. You might borrow ideas from psychology, sociology, economics, all sorts of different fields.
I can see how this part would be the most challenging,
Yeah, it can be tough.
but also the most rewarding.
It's definitely the most fun.
It's like you're building the case for your research brick by brick.
You got it. A strong why can make your research so much more convincing.
Okay, we've got our puzzle, our framing, and our theory. What's the next step in our research journey? Where do we go to actually do this research?
So now we need to set the stage.
Okay.
We need to talk about the research setting,
Right.
which is basically where and how you're going to collect your data.
Right. So it's like choosing the location for our movie, right? Why can't we just study anything anywhere? Why does the setting matter so much?
Well, the setting needs to be a good fit for your research question and your theoretical framework. It's like choosing the right backdrop for a play. You wouldn't stage a play about ancient Rome in a modern skyscraper, right?
Yeah, it's a pretty obvious example, but to
Yeah.
get your point, you need a setting that makes sense for the story you're trying to tell.
Right.
So if we're studying how remote work affects teamwork, we probably wouldn't choose a company where everyone works in the same office.
Yeah, that wouldn't make much sense.
Exactly.
The setting has to be relevant to what you're studying,
It does.
but it's not just about relevance. It's also about trustworthiness. We need to be confident that the data we're collecting is reliable and accurate, and ideally the setting should be representative.
Okay.
In other words, can we apply what we learn in this specific setting to other settings as well?
So if we're studying a very unique company, it might be harder to generalize our findings to other companies.
Yeah.
Like if we're studying, let's say, a tech startup in Silicon Valley, those findings might not apply to a traditional manufacturing company in the Midwest.
Yeah, that's a great example.
Researchers need to think carefully about how representative their setting is and what that means for how broadly their findings can be applied.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've chosen our location, we've scattered out the perfect setting.
All right.
What comes next I have a feeling this is where things might start to get a bit technical.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Now we're talking about research design and analysis. I can see that look on your face, like you're about to enter a scary movie.
Well, yeah, this is the part where I usually start to feel a little lost. All the stats and the methods.
I get it. But honestly, the most important thing here is transparency. The researcher needs to clearly explain their methods so that you, the reader, can follow along and understand how they arrived at their conclusions.
So even if I don't understand all the fancy statistical terms, I should still be able to grasp the logic behind their analysis.
Absolutely. They need to explain how they're approaching the problem, whether it's through deduction or induction or something else entirely. They also need to be clear about what level they're analyzing. Is it at the individual level, the team level, maybe even the entire organization? And of course, they have to describe the data they used and the specific methods they used to analyze that data.
So the specifics might change depending on the type of research.
Of course, yeah.
But being clear and transparent is always essential.
Transparency is key. It's all about making sure the reader can understand what you did and why you did it.
And there's one more important piece here.
Oh, there is one more. Yes, it's the counterfactual.
The counterfactual. Now that sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie.
I know, it does sound a bit fancy. But it's actually a pretty simple idea. The counterfactual is all about asking, what would have happened if things were different? It helps us figure out if what we're observing is actually caused by the thing we're studying, or if it would have happened anyway.
Oh, okay, I see. So if we're studying the impact of, let's say, a new training program on employee performance,
yeah,
the counterfactual would be asking, what would happen to those employees' performance if they hadn't received the training?
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. So the counterfactual helps us isolate the effect of the thing we're interested in.
It helps us rule out other explanations.
Okay, so we've designed our study, we've collected our data, we've analyzed it, and we've considered the counterfactual. Now what? This is the moment of truth, right?
Yeah.
What did we actually learn from all this work?
Yeah, that's the big question.
It is.
And it leads us to one of the most exciting parts of the research process, the findings. It's like opening a present after a long wait.
It's true.
You finally get to see what all this hard work has uncovered.
So we finally get to see what all this hard work has uncovered. Not just the raw data, but what it all means in the context of our research puzzle.
Exactly. This is where the authors present their findings, the patterns they observed in their data, and explain how it all relates back to that initial puzzle they set out to solve.
I'm ready to hear the story. We are in the middle of our deep dive into the AMJ Management Research Canvas, and we've just reached the exciting part, the research findings.
Yeah, the findings. This is where researchers get to share what they uncovered. You know, those aha moments that make the whole research process worthwhile.
So it's not just about numbers and graphs.
No, not at all. It really depends on the type of research that's been done. If the study uses a lot of hard data, you might see charts and graphs and statistical results, all that good stuff. But for a study that's more qualitative, based on interviews or observations, the findings might be presented as emerging themes or patterns in people's experiences.
So whether it's numbers or narratives, the findings should directly answer the research question we talked about earlier.
Exactly, yeah. It all comes full circle.
I guess it's not enough to just present those pieces,
Yeah.
right? We need to explain what the bigger picture is, like what it all means.
Right, you're exactly right. That's where the contributions come in. This is where researchers really get to shine.
Okay.
They need to explain how their findings actually change the way we think about the topic.
So it's not just about adding another piece of information to the pile. It's about changing the shape of the pile.
Yeah.
Making people see it in a whole new light.
That's a great way to put it. And this is where the difference between findings and contributions becomes so important. Findings are the what, the specific things you discover in your research. But the contributions are the so what. It's how those discoveries change our understanding of the topic.
I love that distinction. It's a reminder that research should be more than just a fact-finding mission. It should have real implications for the field and even for how we approach things in our own lives.
Absolutely. And speaking of real-world implications, the AMJ actually really encourages authors to discuss the practical side of their findings.
Okay.
How can these insights be applied in real-world settings? What advice can we give to managers, policymakers, or anyone else who can actually use this knowledge? It's about bridging the gap between research and the real world.
So research shouldn't be confined to the ivory tower. It should have a real impact on how we live and work.
Exactly. Even if a particular study doesn't have immediate practical applications, researchers should still explore the potential implications of their findings. It's about sparking new ideas and encouraging people to think differently about the challenges they face.
Okay, so we've got the findings and the contributions, which are both super important. What's the final piece of this research puzzle?
That would be the boundary conditions and limitations.
Okay.
Every research study has boundaries, like a fence around a property, and it's crucial for researchers to be upfront about those boundaries.
So they're basically saying, here's what our study can tell us, and here's what it can't tell us. It's like being honest about the limits of our knowledge.
Exactly. The boundary conditions tell us where these insights apply and where they might not hold true. For instance, if a study was done in a very specific industry, like healthcare, the findings might not be generalizable to another industry, like manufacturing. It's like knowing the difference between a local map and a world map.
Right. You can't use a map of Paris to navigate London. And the limitations might be about things like the sample size or the methods used to collect the data, or any other factors that could have influenced the results.
You got it. It's all about transparency and honesty about the strengths and weaknesses of the research. And acknowledging limitations isn't a sign of weakness. It's actually a sign of strength.
How so?
Because it shows that the researchers are aware of the limitations of their study and they're not overstating their findings. It's like saying, we've learned a lot from this study, but there's still more to explore. And you know what? Acknowledging limitations can actually pave the way for future research.
So it's like saying, here's some more puzzles for other researchers to solve.
Exactly. By acknowledging the limitations, researchers are inviting others to build upon their work, to take the research even further. That's how knowledge progresses, one study building upon another, adding more pieces to the puzzle.
This is fascinating. It's like seeing all the pieces of the research puzzle fit together. From the initial puzzle to the findings, the contributions, and even the limitations. It all paints a more complete picture of the research landscape.
It really does, and the Management Research Canvas, as we've seen, provides a valuable framework for both doing research and for being a more critical reader of research. It helps us understand how all the pieces fit together to create a meaningful and impactful whole.
I'm definitely going to be using this canvas as a lens when I'm reading research articles from now on. It's like having a secret decoder ring to unlock the mysteries of academic writing.
I encourage you to do the same. It can make reading research papers so much more enjoyable and far less intimidating.
And who knows, maybe it'll even inspire you to conduct some research of your own. What puzzles are you curious about? What mysteries would you like to solve?
That's a great question for our listeners to ponder. All right, we're in the home stretch.
We've journeyed through the puzzles and the framing and the theory building and setting the stage. We even uncovered those precious findings.
We did.
But what's left?
Yeah.
Like, how do we make sure all this amazing research actually gets out into the world and makes a difference?
That's the question, isn't it?
It is.
Like, what's the point of all this if nobody reads it or if it doesn't have any impact?
And that's something the AMJ editorial team really emphasizes, right?
Big time. They actually call this final stage impactful dissemination.
Impactful dissemination, huh?
It sounds very official, but it basically means making sure your research gets out there and makes a difference.
So it's not enough to just do the research. You have to actually communicate it effectively.
You got to get it out there.
Right, so that it can have a real impact.
Share the knowledge.
What good is a treasure chest full of knowledge if it's just sitting in a dark corner collecting dust?
Totally agree. So the authors actually lay out a few key things that researchers should think about to make sure their work reaches the right audience and has a real impact.
All right, let's hear them. What's the first thing researchers should consider when it comes to sharing their work?
Well, first and foremost, clarity is key. Like, researchers need to present their findings in a way that's clear, concise, and accessible to their target audience. Remember, not everyone speaks fluent academic jargon, right? Sometimes we need a translator.
So ditch the fancy words and complex sentences. Make it something anyone can pick up and understand, even if they're not a researcher themselves.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
Think of it like writing a great blog post or giving an engaging presentation.
Yeah.
You want to capture people's attention, make them care about what you're saying, and help them understand the key takeaways without getting bogged down in a ton of technical details.
Clarity makes total sense.
Yeah.
What else? What else should researchers keep in mind?
They also need to think carefully about where they're sharing their work. You know, is it a highly specialized academic journal? Or maybe a more general management publication? Could be a blog post aimed at practitioners. Choosing the right outlet is super important for reaching the right people.
It's like choosing the right social media platform to share something.
Right, exactly.
You wouldn't post a detailed research paper on TikTok, and you probably wouldn't share a funny meme in like a scientific journal. You want to make sure your message is reaching the people who are most likely to be interested in it and actually benefit from it.
Exactly. You want to hit the right audience. And the AMJ also encourages researchers to think beyond traditional academic publishing. They highlight the importance of sharing research findings through conferences, workshops, webinars, even podcasts like this one.
It's about getting the word out in creative and engaging ways.
You got to be creative these days.
Right.
Find new ways to connect with people.
So it's not just about writing a paper and hoping people will find it. It's about being proactive and finding ways to bring the research to life for a wider audience.
Yeah, make it exciting. Make it relevant.
And what was that last piece of advice?
Oh, right. The last thing they emphasize is to be open to feedback.
Okay.
Engage in conversations about your research. Respond to questions, clarify misunderstandings, and be willing to revise and resubmit your work based on the feedback you receive.
That's so important. Research shouldn't be a one-way street. It's about being part of a larger conversation, learning from others, and refining your ideas over time, which is kind of, the whole ethos of this podcast, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Revise and resubmit. It's not just a catchy name. It's a way of life.
It's true. This whole deep dive into the AMJ Management Research Canvas has been incredibly insightful. It's just amazing to see how much thought and care goes into crafting a truly impactful research project from start to finish.
Yeah, it's a journey, but it's a journey worth taking.
It is. It is. And a huge thank you to the authors of this editorial, Cinziana Dorobantu, Mark Gruber, Davide Ravasi, and Ned Wellman. They've really created an invaluable resource for researchers at all levels. And they've reminded us that research isn't just about, data and analysis. It's about solving puzzles, changing minds, and ultimately making a difference in the world.
It is. It's about making a contribution.
And remember, the AMJ is an FT50 listed journal, which means it's one of the most prestigious and influential publications in the field of management research. So you're getting top-notch insights from some of the best minds in the field.
Absolutely. The best of the best.
Well, that's about it for today's deep dive into the AMJ Management Research Canvas.
I hope everyone enjoyed it.
I hope so too. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe to Revise and Resubmit on Spotify so you don't miss any of our future explorations into the world of academic research.
And you can also find us on Amazon Music, YouTube Music, and Apple Podcasts. So no matter how you get your podcast fix, we've got you covered.
Thanks for joining us, and until next time, keep revising and resubmitting.
Keep those research engines running.